when Io Wilson implied Caitlin Clark bore some responsibility for the WNBA Finals debacle. The reaction was swift and polarized. Wilson, a dominant veteran voice, framed Clark's influence as disruptive, but the numbers say otherwise. While Clark was breaking viewership records and selling out arenas, the league stumbled in capitalizing on that surge. The finals, hyped as a culmination of growth, ended up exposing a league in decline. Wilson's remarks, intentional or not, redirected the spotlight, but to many, they read as scapegoating the one figure still bringing eyes to the sport. Clark didn't engineer the WNBA's instability, she exposed it. From the jealousy-laced rivalries to the league's tepid promotion of its biggest star, the finals weren't just underwhelming. They were a reflection of deeper fractures. Wilson's frustration is real, but blaming Clark distracts from the larger truth. The league failed to adapt. If Clark's presence is disruptive, it's because she's disrupted a system that needed it. Whether the WNBA embraces her or continues to resist change will determine if this finals disaster becomes a turning point, or just another missed opportunity. Io Wilson said what a lot of people in the league were thinking, but maybe shouldn't have said out loud. In the wreckage of the WNBA Finals, with viewership cratering and ticket prices hitting new lows, Wilson pointed the finger at Caitlin Clark. And just like that, the post-finals narrative shifted away from performance and into blame. The frustration wasn't just about the loss. It was about what the season had become. Or rather, who the season had become about. Clark didn't play in the finals. She wasn't on the court. She wasn't involved in the last-second calls or the missed opportunities. But her presence, or maybe more accurately, her shadow, was everywhere. And for a league that had spent the year caught in a tug-of-war between tradition and transformation, Wilson's remarks didn't just reflect frustration. They exposed a fracture. This season wasn't just about basketball. It became a battle for control over the narrative, over legacy, and over who gets to define the future of women's basketball. And the person in the middle of all that tension? A 22-year-old rookie who turned women's basketball into a trending topic on a national level. Caitlin Clark's rise changed everything. Her games broke viewership records. Her jersey became a top seller overnight. Her presence sold out arenas, even on the road. She made WNBA broadcasts a topic on daily sports shows, not just niche Twitter circles. And that kind of impact didn't go unnoticed. It also didn't go unchallenged. Veteran players, league officials, and even some media voices began pushing back. Not in outright press conferences, but through passive-aggressive comments, coded language, and flat-out resistance. Clark was too hyped, too praised, too privileged, too white. It wasn't just skepticism, it was resentment. You could hear it when Diana Taurasi warned that reality was coming.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
You could feel it when Cheryl Swoops questioned what Clark had actually done yet. You could see it when Kennedy Carter body-checked her in a game that became symbolic of the hostility she faced. And you could really see it in the constant social media back and forth between Clark fans and the league's old guard. The WNBA had an opportunity. Clark had pulled in a new audience, casual fans, sports bros, young girls, longtime skeptics, and the league could have embraced that moment. They could have built a bridge between eras, pairing Clark with legends to build mutual respect and shared spotlight. But that's not what happened. Instead, Clark was left out there alone. There was no unifying campaign, no veteran-led welcome, no league-driven initiative to frame her rise as part of the bigger story. What happened instead was subtle isolation. The vibe was clear. She didn't earn it the right way. And now, with the finals in the rearview mirror and the metrics looking worse than anyone expected, the league is scrambling. Attendance was down. Tickets for major games were selling for less than $10. Entire sections sat empty. And despite official league accounts trying to push record ratings, fans weren't convinced. Allegations started circulating that the league inflated viewership numbers for Game 1. The numbers looked too perfect, too convenient, too detached from what fans were seeing with their own eyes. half-full arenas, and barely any buzz. This disconnect between the public narrative and on-the-ground reality became impossible to ignore. The league said it was thriving. The numbers showed something else. And in that environment, the finger-pointing began. Clark was never officially blamed in a statement, but I.O. Wilson's comments made it clear. The distraction, the media obsession, the imbalance of attention, it all had consequences. And from her perspective, those consequences hit hard in the finals. But that framing doesn't hold up. Because Clark didn't hijack the season. The league handed it to her. And then they resented her for taking the spotlight they offered. Her games were promoted harder. Her name appeared more. Her interviews were front and center. But the truth is, that wasn't her fault. That was the league trying to finally cash in on mainstream relevance, and doing it in the most short-sighted way possible. They didn't build up the rest of the league alongside Clark. They didn't promote other stars with the same energy. And when backlash started bubbling from within, they didn't address it. They let Clark be the lightning rod for everything, from race dynamics to legacy debates to pay gap discourse. And when finals viewership dipped, when empty seats became a story, it was easier to point at the distraction than to admit that fans weren't invested in the players who were left. This isn't just a Caitlin Clark issue. It's a leadership issue. Because the league's failure to protect its breakout star, to celebrate her and its veterans, and to guide the narrative with a steady hand, it all led here. To a finals that underdelivered. To a league with a fractured identity. To a fan base that feels disillusioned. Clark brought in fans who were new to women's basketball. She turned local markets into national talking points. And instead of converting that attention into long-term growth, the WNBA let internal jealousies and outdated power dynamics dilute the moment. This season exposed how resistant the league still is to change. Clark didn't create that resistance, but she did expose it. And the response from players, coaches, media, and even fans has shown just how deep that resistance runs. There are 7 levels of hate described in the video. From casual shade to outright hostility. From passive dismissals to physical play meant to send a message. And all of that pointed to a league not only uncomfortable with Clark's dominance, but unwilling to evolve to meet what she represented. At the heart of the tension is a battle for ownership of the narrative. Does the league belong to the players who built it, who endured the lean years, the sparse coverage, the disrespect from mainstream sports media? Or does it now pivot to embrace a future shaped by stars who didn't suffer the same path, but bring a new level of attention and opportunity? The answer should be both. But the league didn't strike that balance. Instead, Clark became a symbol of division. Not because she wanted to be, but because the league made her one. And now the WNBA stands at crossroads. Either it learns from this season and creates a system where stars are protected, rivalries are respected without being personal, and growth doesn't come at the expense of inclusion, or it doubles down on the politics and gatekeeping that dragged this season into chaos. Because make no mistake, this was chaos. A generational star being blamed for the failures of a system that used her, undersupported her, and then discarded her when the numbers didn't hold up? That's not a branding issue. That's structural. If the WNBA wants to survive this moment, it needs to stop punishing success. It needs to stop letting internal conflicts shape public perception. And it needs to stop acting like one player, no matter how popular, is the problem. Caitlin Clark didn't ruin the finals. She wasn't even in them. But the league's obsession with her, combined with its refusal to properly manage that obsession, created a season that felt more like a reality show than a sports league. And when the lights came up and the seats were empty, the only person left holding the bag was Clark. That's not leadership. That's cowardice. So where does the WNBA go from here? That depends entirely on whether the league is ready to take accountability, whether it can face the racial tensions, the internal resentment, and the growing disconnect between how it presents itself and how fans actually experience it. Because this season could have been the beginning of a renaissance. Instead, it became a referendum. Clark has already done her part. She showed up. She changed the game. She stayed composed through it all. Now it's on the league to decide whether it wants to support stars or sacrifice them. The future of women's basketball depends on that choice. So let us know, was Aya Wilson justified in her frustration? Did the league mishandle Caitlin Clark's rise? Can the WNBA still repair the trust it broke this season? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And make sure to subscribe for more coverage of the biggest moments in sports, celebrity meltdowns, and media chaos. Because in this league, the drama doesn't wait for the offseason. It is the season. The WNBA finals are over, the dust is settled, and the league is standing in the wreckage of a season that should have been historic, but ended up exposing every weak link in its foundation. And the one name still echoing through the aftermath? Caitlin Clark. She wasn't in the finals. She didn't miss a shot, drop a pass, or botch a game plan. But somehow, she's the name getting tossed around like she was the reason the season spiraled. Because that's what happens when a league gets caught between protecting its legacy and refusing to evolve. The tension was never just about Clark. It was about what she represented, a new wave, a new audience, a new kind of attention that didn't play by the old rules. And instead of celebrating that shift, embracing the change, and integrating it into the league's identity, the WNBA treated it like a virus. Let's be real. Aya Wilson's post-finals comments didn't exist in a vacuum. They came after months of uncomfortable energy, subtle digs, and very public moments that made it clear. There was a line drawn in the sand. Old guard versus new face. Earned versus given. Grit versus hype. And in the middle of it all, Clark was doing exactly what she was supposed to, playing. Performing. Breaking records. Filling arenas. Drawing national attention. And still, the hostility kept coming. Kennedy Carter's uncalled hit wasn't just a foul, it was a message. Diana Taurasi's quote about reality wasn't just a soundbite, it was a warning. Cheryl Swoop's comments about Clark not being all that weren't just shade. They were rooted in resentment. And all of it created an environment that felt toxic, not competitive. This wasn't tough love. It wasn't earning your stripes. It was gatekeeping dressed up as tradition. And the league didn't just tolerate it. They silently sanctioned it. They allowed it to define the narrative. And when the finals arrived and the energy was flat and the seats were empty and the ratings dipped, they had no one left to blame but the person they never protected in the first place. Clark didn't fail the league. The league failed her. They failed to support her in the face of backlash. They failed to market other players with the same consistency. They failed to build a cohesive, unified narrative around the influx of new fans she brought in. And most damning of all, they failed to recognize that gatekeeping growth isn't protecting the game. It's poisoning it. Let's talk about those fans for a second. The ones who showed up for the first time this season. The dads who brought their daughters. The college fans who followed Clark from Iowa. The casuals who didn't know the difference between a pick and roll and a travel violation, but bought tickets because of her. They didn't come for the legacy debates. They didn't come to get schooled on who deserved attention more. They came for the excitement, the energy, the entertainment. And when Clark was met with hostility instead of celebration, when the veterans dismissed her presence instead of amplifying it, when the finals tried to carry on without her and delivered silence instead of buzz, those fans saw it, and they backed off. Because nobody wants to support a league that punishes its most visible player for being too successful. That confuses authenticity for arrogance. That allows jealousy to override vision. And the numbers don't lie. The ticket prices were embarrassing. Games in the biggest moment of the season, games that were supposed to be a culmination of everything the league had worked for, were going for less than fast food. The optics weren't just bad. They were humiliating. Even worse, the response from the league's inner circle wasn't urgency. It wasn't reflection. It was deflection. That's how we ended up with Aya Wilson, an MVP, a finals face, and someone who should be celebrated, putting Caitlin Clark's name in the middle of the mess. And let's be clear, Wilson deserves her flowers. She's elite. She's consistent. She's everything a franchise player should be. But even she wasn't immune to the narrative trap that the league's downer must somehow trace back to Clark. Because it's easier to blame a person than a system. The problem is that kind of thinking reveals the deeper issue. This league doesn't know how to handle real, disruptive star power. Clark didn't come in quietly. She didn't wait her turn. She arrived with fire, with attention, with crossover appeal. She changed the scale. And instead of building around her, the WNBA treated her like a threat to be neutralized. And now they're paying the price. They tried to inflate the finals ratings, hoping fans wouldn't notice the lack of buzz. They tried to push the growth narrative, hoping no one would ask why seats were empty. But the truth was visible. It was loud. It was in every social media post, every resale ticket listing, every broadcast that felt like filler instead of fire. And the worst part? They had the blueprint. They had Clark. They had Angel Reese. They had tension, storylines, personality. They had a league of world-class athletes. But instead of marketing it like the entertainment powerhouse it could be, they let bitterness dictate branding. What could have been a celebration turned into a cautionary tale. Now, the future is uncertain. Will Clark stay? Will she continue to carry a league that often felt like it resented her presence? Will fans keep showing up if the message they get is that their favorite player doesn't belong? Will veterans and newcomers find a way to coexist without the bitterness? The WNBA is on the edge of something, growth or collapse. And what happens next depends entirely on whether it can course correct. Can it embrace Clark and everything she represents without sidelining the players who came before her? Can it stop relying on fake narratives and start telling real, compelling stories? Can it protect its stars instead of throwing them to the wolves when things go wrong? Or will it double down on the same patterns? Let internal politics rule, let resentment simmer, and let another finals pass by with no real growth to show for it? Because here's the thing, Clark isn't going anywhere. Whether she stays in the WNBA, goes international, or becomes an even bigger cultural figure, her impact is undeniable. She brought fans. She brought money. She brought attention. And if the WNBA doesn't figure out how to build with her, not around her, with her, they're going to lose a lot more than just a final series. They're going to lose the trust of the very people who were ready to ride for this league. What we're seeing now isn't just fallout from a disappointing finals. It's a full-blown identity crisis. The WNBA had a chance, the chance to finally turn the corner into the mainstream. And instead of capitalizing on a wave of new attention, new fans, and a star that could carry the league into a different cultural stratosphere, they fumbled it. Hard. And not just fumbled. It's like they dropped the ball, stared at it on the ground, and then blamed the person who handed it to them in the first place. That's where Caitlin Clark comes in. Her rise didn't just change the landscape of women's basketball. It detonated the old playbook. Overnight, she brought new fans to the game. She filled arenas, not just in Indiana, but in cities that had never experienced that kind of demand for a women's game. She gave the league a chance to reintroduce itself to the world. And what did the league do in response? They let her get shoved around, literally and figuratively. They let veteran players talk sideways about her in interviews. They stayed silent while she got elbowed, cheap shot, and disrespected game after game. They allowed her to become the center of every controversy, every rivalry, every headline, and then looked surprised when fans started losing trust. By the time the finals rolled around, there was no energy left. The hype had already peaked months ago, during Clark's run. Without her, the buzz evaporated. The seats were empty. The storylines were tired. And the league suddenly realized it had nothing else ready to carry the weight. And instead of taking accountability, they pointed fingers. Aya Wilson's frustration was understandable. She's a beast on the court, a leader, a face of the league. She should be celebrated. But throwing shade at Caitlin Clark, who wasn't even playing in the finals, isn't leadership. It's misdirection. And it sent a message to fans that the league still doesn't understand what it's dealing with. Because this isn't just about Clark. It's about what she represents, a new generation of fans who don't care about internal politics, who aren't here for veteran entitlement, and who just want to support a player who made them feel something. That's what the old guard doesn't get. Clark didn't take anything from them. She gave them a bigger stage. She gave them a bigger spotlight. She gave them the possibility of more. More revenue, more media, more respect. And instead of building on that moment together, the response from some corners of the league was cold, dismissive, and defensive. So now, fans are asking the real question. Why stay invested in a league that doesn't protect its stars? Why pour money into tickets, merch, and viewership when the person who brought you in gets blamed when things go south? Why support a product that doesn't seem to appreciate the very audience it begged for all these years? The truth is, people don't just fall in love with sports because of the game. They fall in love with the stories, the personalities, the emotional investment. And Clark gave the WNBA all of that on a silver platter. But now, instead of a triumphant new chapter, the league looks fractured, bitter, out of sync with its own future. Clark's success didn't create tension. It revealed it. It showed the cracks in how the league treats new stars. It exposed the insecurity within the veteran core. And it forced fans to reckon with a league that doesn't seem to know how to grow without resentment. The WNBA wants progress, but only on its terms. And Clark? She broke those terms by being too popular too fast. But here's the truth. That's not a problem. That's the whole point of a breakthrough star. You're supposed to build with them, not break them. And unless the league learns how to do that, this won't just be a disappointing finals. It'll be the moment everything stalled. The moment fans walked away. The moment media stopped buying the narrative. The moment a once-in-a-generation opportunity slipped through the cracks because the people in charge were too busy defending the past to protect the future. Caitlin Clark didn't ruin the WNBA. She revealed how unprepared it was for the spotlight. So what happens next? That's on the league. That's on the players. That's on leadership. Because this wasn't a one-player problem. This was a system problem, a culture problem, a vision problem. And unless that changes, don't expect next year to look any different. If you're still watching, if you still believe this league can be great, now's the time to demand better. Respect the stars. Tell real stories. Build bridges instead of walls. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Where do you stand on Clark's treatment? Did the league blow its biggest chance? What will it take for fans to truly trust again? Hit subscribe for more breakdowns of the biggest stories in sports and culture. Because if this season showed us anything, it's that behind every buzzer beater, there's a battle for control, and this one is far from over.